Everyone got their green lights on? We'd like to welcome everybody to Cache County Council. Today, July 11th. Appreciate everyone that is in attendance. I'm sure glad the seats are all full. I hope the hundreds of people that are watching will enjoy it. We'll start with the opening. Councilmember Sandy Goodlander.
That would be me. Okay. I wanted to start with a quote and then I'll finish with a prayer. And this quote is by James Madison, who is my favorite founding father. He said, "Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and a people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power which knowledge gives." And I just have always taken that to heart. I feel like the more we learn, the better we can do, and hopefully we can educate the people that we serve so that they have the knowledge to participate and support us in the things that we do. So, our Heavenly Father, we are so grateful this night for the many blessings that we have. We're grateful for this beautiful weather and for the beautiful valley that we live in this free country. We're so grateful for the privileges and blessings that gives us. We're grateful for those who serve to protect us and ask you to bless them and watch over them and protect them. We're grateful that we have this opportunity to meet together tonight to discuss the governing of this valley and the things that we're asked to make decisions on. We ask you to please bless us and guide us and help us to make wise decisions in all that we do. And we pray for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
I'd like to join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. We're now entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Is unanimous. How about the approval of the minutes? I'll entertain a motion there from June 27th and June 30th for the special meeting.
I wasn't here.
I so moved.
Well, there's one correction.
Okay?
I have a last name, but it wasn't showing on who was here. Members present, Councilman Carl, it says.
We all know who that means.
Yeah.
You're famous.
Will you add his last name?
One name.
Okay, with that correction, will you accept that as a very extremely friendly amendment?
Yes, I will.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So in the next 5 minutes or less, County Executive, your report.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just have a couple of quick items for you. I just wanted to mention that I attended, UAC hosted a Justice Summit, and was able to attend that. Some really good information that I was able to hear there. They had some legislators talking about legislation related to justice initiatives, and I'd be happy to share more information at some later time if you'd like to meet with me, or I could give you a summary. And then the drainage districts, I know were brought up last time. Janine is working on those, and there are actually a few of them that she's working on, and those are ones that require advertising. She's going to be advertising, so we should be bringing several recommended appointments related to drainage districts for you soon. Just wanted to make sure any employees or officials listening are reminded about the employee picnic we're having this Thursday. We'd love to have everybody out for that. It's always a great time to get together with our colleagues and to thank our staff for the incredible work they do. And then just the last item I wanted to mention, just really good news, an initiative that we've been working on for a couple of years now to try to get cell towers in Logan Canyon. We've been able to secure some funding from the legislature for that project to be done by UDOT. UDOT's actually going to do the project, and it's about 31 miles of fiber optic cable that they'll put through the canyon, and my understanding is they'll also be putting electric line in at the same time, which will help them to be able to operate changeable message signs, traffic cameras, traffic sensors, weather stations, a variety of things to help improve traffic and safety in there. And in addition to that, they're working with a number of private cell phone providers who are planning to install cell towers throughout the canyon so that we'll have cell service for people there, which will be incredibly helpful and useful in case of an emergency, which we know happens all too often in that canyon. So I just wanted to publicly thank everybody who's helped with that effort, especially Senator Wilson, our good senator from Logan, who has been a great advocate for that project and the funding that he helped us to secure for that, but also the staff at UDOT and the governor's office, as well as our federal delegation. I've met with them a number of times over the last couple of years about this issue because of some challenges related to the federal lands in that area that they've been very helpful with in helping us to ensure that these towers can go in eventually once the fiber optic line is in. So I just thought that was incredibly great news. Wanted to thank everybody who's been involved with that and look forward to that project being completed. So thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes my report for this evening.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to 6A, report from the Waste Management. Blake, if you'd come up here and introduce yourself and
Yeah, first and foremost, Blake Leanelli with WM, also known as Waste Management. Chair, Council, thank you so much for having me out this evening. Wanted to give an update on kind of where we're at in the process and then also to open it up for questions. I know there's a lot of questions out there, and as we go through this, been trying to meet with every council, meet with each of the mayors, to really identify any challenges that they may be facing or things they may be hearing. Our big communication begins next week, which you will see. I'm very excited to report that we did start some commercial services work this week. We went live at our building, got all of that started. So we're in the process of doing some road maintenance as well as building maintenance on that property, which is located in North Logan. As we go through this process, this is something that was new to a lot of people, but we had been looking at this as a strategic opportunity to come to this valley for the past 4 years. So although it came up pretty suddenly, this was something that Waste Management had been looking at, having an opportunity to service this area both commercially and residentially. We also look at this project as something that may be expanding over time. We've had a lot of interested parties outside of the CWC looking at that. Obviously, with the contract we have in place, residential services are limited to the work of the CWC, but looking at areas of opportunity. A lot of the questions that have come about have been around green waste. Green waste, as David and Mr. Zook and I have been discussing, those are items that we will begin service on October 1st, and we'll be looking at those green wastes on a city-by-city basis of how that will look. Some cities are going to choose to do mandatory green waste. Other cities are looking at drop sites. We're Waste Management. That's the exciting part about partnering with a company like ourselves, is we're very nimble and able to look at each city and county on an individualized basis. So this past week, we're working to get some of the social media information. You'll be seeing that in the next week, hitting your residents. I know there's some questions around a couple cities that started residential service on July 1st. And so there was a question going, hey, when do we start? When do we start? And that date is October 1st is when that will begin. But the active communication campaign will begin this week, ratchet up more August 1st and their 4th. So that's some of the exciting updates that we have at this point. Wanted to take a breath real quick and see what questions that the council may have at this juncture.
So as you send out that media blast, and citizens have questions and that, is there gonna be a phone number or contact place that's put there that they can start even before October 1st calling and getting their fears calmed and questions answered?
There will be, and you'll see that contact is myself. Tuesday through Thursday for the past 7 months, I've been living up here, working with each one of the councils as well as citizens as they have had questions, really answering that. They may have come through the council, addressing that, and then any individualized person saying, you know what, here's my cell number, please reach out. So we have had some of that communication thus far, but yes, that will be part of the communication.
So in part of your social media outreach, is it gonna include, like, how they're gonna get bins? What days they're gonna be in each, pickups for each community, like just the logistics of payments, like all of those things, because I'm getting hit with those questions now. And I just refer them back to the city for now, because I don't know. So, yeah.
Great question. And so just so you know, to address this a lot of what you have now is not going to change. It's just, rather than, a blue truck, it's going to be a green truck.
Right.
And even initially, we will be purchasing some of the vehicles from Logan City that can pass our DOT standards. But we purchase the containers from Logan City, so even the containers, it will look very similar. As far as your question about days, routing, all of that, billing, that will all stay the same. Also, we'll be sending out a flyer postcard to each individual resident, letting them know Waste Management's taken over. If their date's the same, it'll say, great news, your date stayed the same. If it's changed, we'll say, great news, you now have a new date. This is the dates that you'll be serviced. So, residents should not have any questions by the time, this multi-pronged approach is done of where to go, how the billing's done, what containers. But thus far, the containers will stay for commercial businesses as well as residential service.
Thanks.
How's your meetings gone with the communities and the mayors and the councils and that?
Gone exceptionally well. The feedback has been really well received, and I'll state this to your community. We want to be part of your community. And so as we look to do and go live, we want individuals in Cache Valley to know that Waste Management is here. We're the new garbage provider, new recycling provider. So if you look at strategic opportunities that we can be more involved in your community, please reach out. Let us know. I know we've reached out to the county, different elements with cities in the CWC to do strategic sponsorship opportunities to show that, hey, we're part of your community. Where can we be involved? How can we help on education? So it's gone. I can tell you, there will be hiccups. Do not get me wrong. So I'd be, speaking out of turn to say everything's going to go smooth. Now, it's how we handle those hiccups, and thus far it's gone very smooth. But we anticipate this just when we set up any community to have a different, different hiccups along the way, and it's gone really smooth thus far.
Question on the drivers, were they hired from Logan City, or do you have your own people that you've brought in?
We have both. So we have very strict background process, DOT process, training processes. So those individuals that can pass our background, yes, we will be looking to hire those Logan employees. And we also have a line of Waste Management employees that are looking forward to coming up here, but we are giving the Logan employees first right of refusal for those opportunities. But we have many of our employees that reside here in the Cache Valley as well as Brigham City that have been very eager to put their hat in the ring to say that they would like to come to the area. The staffing process has gone very good at this point, and normally that's the biggest challenge that we face. And what will be more difficult for us is backfilling those positions for our existing employees from the ones that want to come here. So,
Thank you.
Currently, you'll be hauling all the garbage to the transfer station.
We will.
Is there any hopes or any possible changes or things we need to look at to possible change the CUP to actually have direct haul straight to the landfill?
Yes, we'll be looking at that. I believe over the next year, there's going to be some opportunity for both the county as well as the CWC, as well as Waste Management for those opportunities. Anytime we come into a project like this, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We like to come in, get things standardized, and then we like to look at efficiencies where it makes sense. And that's what we've been doing. We've been working with Logan. I met with the recycling facility, today. We're the largest recycler in North America, so we look for opportunities of where we can provide the best value. And so when you ask those questions, yes, that is coming on the horizon, but I'd be remiss to come in and say, you need to do this day one, you need to do this day, it's really about getting things standardized and then looking for those opportunities. So, but yes, those conversations have been had.
Just one question I have for my own information. What communities then have opted in, so that I have an idea of who's still kind of looking on their own? I think, didn't Providence?
It would probably be easier to say which ones.
Yes.
Not?
Providence is doing their own thing. They're not hiring a hauler, they're buying their own trucks and having their staff do it. And then Smithfield, Richmond, and Lewiston each banded together to hire a private hauler. And then
Cornish.
Cornish, oh yeah, Cornish is part of that too. And then everybody else is part of the Waste Consortium.
So yeah, I was going to say, it's easier to say who's not in, and we even look at that evolving over time as well. We have a non-compete on the residential service. I can tell you on the commercial side of business, we'll be looking at all aspects to service, what is available, for Waste Management.
Thank you.
Yep. Great question though.
Can I just say too, for public information or for those of you that are here, we own a business in Smithfield and we received a letter about the coming changes of who they had hired to haul our garbage, and it was significantly more expensive than what we had been paying. So I contacted Waste Management and they said, yes, we are totally available to do commercial jobs. They gave us a contract that was far more favorable and at a better price and better terms in the contract. So that is an option for commercial. It wouldn't happen in residential, but anybody that has commercial people that in those areas, that is an option. They don't have to tie into that one contract.
Thank you for stating that. And just to piggyback off that a little bit, we have started outside of the consortium on commercial services this past week, and we will be sending out a notification to all businesses that we are an option. Our building will be done, ready to go as of October 1st, but we do have a satellite facility that we're running out of there to be able to service businesses at this time. So thank you for saying that.
Where's your building located?
It's in North Logan, out by the airport. So, the old roller coaster building, that's what we've taken over. We secured a lease last month, and it's going really well thus far. Very happy about the location, the access, and time will tell, but it's so far we think it's a perfect location at this point.
I just wanted to mention that I hope we can find some type of a plan to take care of green waste, because historically we've had a lot of green waste bins around the county, and if we don't have something like that in place, I'm concerned that green waste will get dumped in the county, especially in unincorporated areas. That's a very common thing. If people don't have a place to take it, they're going to find a place, and that ends up being a farmer's field or a ditch or behind somebody's house, and usually somewhere where we don't want it. So I think it would be advantageous for everyone in the county if we had some effective approach for dealing with green waste other than people hauling it all the way to the landfill, because people just don't want to do that. It's a very challenging issue though, and I know the approach that was taken with Logan City previously was very challenging with the cities, with commercial haulers dumping there, people dumping things that were not green waste, the frequency of the pickups that were needed, and I think a lot of the cities are actually happy to not have a green waste bin in their community because it was so much work. However, if that's what ends up happening and the cities don't host those, people are gonna have to find somewhere else to take that green waste, and it might not be the landfill. So I think that's something that warrants further discussion.
And to that point, Mr. Zook, we're looking at all of those items. We will be addressing that in the fall and winter because, you know, when we take over October 1st, you know, green waste will have passed. So we'll be looking in the fall and winter of what those best options are. We don't make those decisions for you. We have the resources to do what you need. Really, our objective is to come to you with options to let you know, hey, we've done this throughout the country. We're the largest hauler in North America. We see this working, this successful, but we also know that the unincorporated area is very unique. And so that's where we'll be looking for some of those strategic opportunities of what will best work best for your residents. No other questions? You guys are letting me off way too easy tonight. So
You're doing a good job.
hey, there you go. So, and it is going very well. We're excited. And look at the different opportunities, please. I encourage you. We want to be part of your community. We want individuals to know that Waste Management is here. So, you know, it's great to see the green trucks. It's great to know that, but we're more about, you know, being that pillar of your community where we can help around recycling, you know, areas for bulk waste events and different things like that. So really look to see where we can be part of your community.
There is one other waste disposal area that I don't think you deal with, but we sure would. It'd be wonderful if you did.
Okay.
And that is the dead animal.
Okay.
Right now, Logan has actually quit. They're still taking dead animals at the landfill, free, but they have actually taken, they used to have a disposal site in Amalga, and which they were actually augmenting with some funds.
Mm-hmm.
They quit those funds, so that guy now, basically, he's just had to shut the door on taking those dead animals there. And when he shut these dairymen, a lot of these people, they have something that they gotta move and move fast. There's sometimes this is shut down for the weekend, and so you can get a cow that can get fairly bloated.
Yeah.
And it's hard to dispose of at that point, and then to travel so far. So we need to really look into the possibility of something, which I don't know whether you would deal with that, but we as a council or something, or we need to look at that to where we have a disposal site or something more than just the landfill.
These are the exact opportunities that we're looking for. Logan has come to us. They've expressed what's going on around the dead animals. You know, currently they're not charging, currently, you know, and, you know, but we're looking for alternative options. So if there's an area, because I was unaware that that was occurring, yeah, if we can help in that process, if we can provide bins, if there's something we can do to help in that process, those are the type of opportunities that we're looking for.
Yeah, the business out there was basically they were given some money each year, and it became to where affordable and even a little bit profitable for him to take more than what animals he could actually render, and then those that he didn't render, he could pick them up and then bring them down to the landfill altogether. But without that little subsidy,
Okay.
then he can't afford to do it. And
Why
so-
don't we, let's take this as a one-off. Maybe you can provide the business's name, kind of how it was being done, and we can look to see how we may be able to get involved in that process to help out. But yeah, those are the type of things that we want to look at to be able to provide for the residents of the community. Really, we're wanting to make your service better, not, start looking at cutting services. We want to be that premier provider. That's how people look at waste management, as really being that Cadillac of service.
We'll have that discussion then.
Perfect.
Appreciate it.
And Mr. Zook has all my contact information. I'll make sure all of you have it as well. So you have that available.
Appreciate that. Other questions?
Thanks for coming.
Yep,
Appreciate it
absolutely.
very much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Look forward to your phone calls.
We've got about 5 minutes before we have a public hearing. Let's see. Actually, let's go ahead. We'll have to on 6B and 6C. They might take a, Alma, will yours take very long? Let's wait then. Right, so let's go ahead and if we can, at that point, let's go ahead and do 8A and 8B, set those public hearings, and then that'll get us a little bit closer to the 5:30 on the public hearing. So I'd entertain motions on those.
I'll make a motion to set public hearing for ordinance 2023-25, amending the definition and standards associated with accessory apartments to comply with recent changes in state code. I'll go ahead and set public hearing for July 25th, 2023 for ordinance 2023-26, amending 17.10 development standards specific to industrial zone development for agricultural processing facilities specific to food production.
Second that.
Move second that we set the public hearings for ordinance 2023-25 and 2023-26 for July 25th. Got a question on that. Do we have very many council people that are going to be absent that day? Because I know one of those is probably one that we are going to have probably a lot of, might have a lot of feedback on.
I'll be there.
I'll be here.
Okay. Is there any discussion on those? Hearing none, we proceed to vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so they will be on the 25th. Let's go ahead, it's close enough here, estimated 5:30 for the public hearing of ordinance 2023-22, 8479 rezone. Mr. Watkins, would you please share, enlighten us a little bit before we open up for the public hearing?
Certainly. Good to be with you. I'll have this on the screen in just a moment. Here it is. So for your consideration this evening, Council, is a parcel of land located about a mile and a quarter south of Richmond. You see the proximity of Richmond, top of the screen. And adjacent to Highway 91 at the intersection of 91 and 8500 North. There you see the intersection. And this parcel is approximately 8.37 acres. The request is to rezone from the A10 zone to the A2 zone, allowing for increased development at this corner site. And the Planning Commission, in the review at the Planning Commission meeting hearing, felt that although the general plan recommends generally throughout the county A10 remaining, the area remaining low density agricultural with the allowance for residential, they felt that this particular location deserves some special consideration given the intensity of the highway, US 91. And the discussion was that if, for example, this was proposed further west out into the heart of more A10 area and lower intensity and agricultural uses, that they would not be so inclined to recommend to you the rezone to A2. But it's also worth noting that there are a couple of parcels, one with a home on just about a 2-acre parcel just to the opposite corner of the intersection, and a vacant parcel that's just under 2 acres. some other homes on parcels about 5 acre and 7 acres in size, but otherwise quite undeveloped and rural and agricultural in this area. The vote was 4-1. Commissioner Parker feeling that not wanting to stray too much from the general intent of the A2 zone to be closer to communities, but again, that was the prevailing sentiments of the commission, was to recommend approval to you, the council, for consideration, and that concludes my report.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and we'll have the public hearing, and we'll ask some questions later, Mr. Watkins, so don't run too far. Go ahead and open up the public hearing for ordinance 2023-22-8479 rezone. Is there anyone here that would like to speak about that? Mr. Nielsen.
Hello, my name's Jeff Nielsen with Foresight Land Surveying. I'm helping Nan King with this property. I wanted to kind of expand a little bit on what Tim had talked about. You know, some of the discussion in the Planning Commission was to, you know, spot zoning, whether they really wanted to do that or not. And, you know, having been on various planning commissions for almost 20 years, I get it. I mean, I don't like spot zoning either, but I did want to point out one thing, that on the stretch, it's about 3.5 miles from the north end of the Smithfield city limits up to Richmond, and in that 3.5 miles, there are 18 parcels that front the highway that are under 2 acres, or 2 acres or under, and then there are another 12 parcels that are between 2 and 4 acres that front the highway. So in total, you know, there's almost 40 parcels in that 3.5 mile section that are pretty close to what we're looking to do. You know, 2 acres, she's asking for a 2 acre rezone just because you didn't have a 4 acre, because it's right now that property is 8.37 acres. Her ultimate desire is just to split it, not really to do, you know, 4 lots on it. You know, the highway came in, they took a little bit of property across the front, you know, 15 years ago. And so she just wants to be able to do something. You know, it's kind of a unique property. It sits right on the highway. It's at that spot where it's enough acreage that it's, you know, that the value of it is fairly high, but there's not enough acreage to really be able to farm it really well. So anyway, that's why she's trying to split it. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Any others who would like to speak on behalf or anything about it?
Move to close the public hearing.
There's a moving second. We close the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. What questions would you have of Mr. Watkins or any of them?
Mr. Watkins, I sat through that meeting. Mr. Nielsen pointed out some things that bring me some concerns, because if we deviate from what we've said as a council before, RU2's next to municipality. This is 1.25 miles you said from Richmond, right?
Mm-hmm.
Correct. Nielsen talked about, I don't know how many parcels that are near that size. So if we deviate and allow an RU2 here, I think we've opened the door for many things that we can't really justify down in the future, rather than what we've said about RU2s next to a municipality. So I just find that a little bit concerning. I listened to the Planning Commission. I think those commissioners vetted it and did a lot of talking about it, and there was a lot of consideration. This is a unique piece of property, but I can find a lot of unique pieces of property around the county that will start looking and saying, this is what is a unique piece of property, like what we did in here. So I just have some concerns there. And we've got the general plan. I know the general plan is a guideline, but after spending as many years as I did on the planning and zoning and now being the liaison there, I'm just wanting to be careful about what we do with our U2s. So I have a concern with it.
Understood. Yeah, that reminds me a little more of the conversation that I can recall. I think expressed that there was some expression of concern for the intensity for agricultural use right next to the highway, and I don't know how that impacts agricultural use, other than they felt that there was a difference there in terms of a precedent, that they'd be more comfortable setting a precedent for highway adjacency, particularly at an intersection, than elsewhere where it's more remote and surrounded by less intensive agricultural use predominantly. So you're correctly notating the conversation, and that's just another element that I'm recalling. They seem comfortable with that
Talk
precedent.
about agricultural on busy highways, you've covered a lot of Cass County, so whether it's a slow-moving vehicle from a farm or a slow-moving pickup waiting to turn into a house, those are issues. I mean, we saw it tragically out here in Cass Junction with a UTV and a farmer, so those are tragic situations no matter where we're going at on there. So still, I mean, I understand growth, I understand the movement on there, but I still think we set up A2 zones, and this jumps into one of the hearings we're gonna have next week. You have the A2 zones, and I really want to watch what's going on there and watch what's going on RU5s and RU2s too, so.
You know, I know the history of all those parcels that are small. Straight south of there were a bunch that are now small parcels. Back in the 70s, there was quite a little kind of a problem in the planning and zoning department at that time, that you had to have 10 acres to build. So this gentleman in that area just south of there, he would sell them 10, they would build the house, and then he would buy 8 back, or less. And then he would attach it, and he had that going back and forth. It was the most funniest scam you ever saw. And all those homes in that one little area have occurred from that kind of they finally got it shut down, but that was it was eligible, they did it. I know a few of those other parcels, even a little bit further south of there, that are smaller. They were at one time part of bigger parcels, and they were taken off because of, and they were downsized and then created these ag remainders so that families could then put them into trusts and not affect all of the properties. And if we start, I'm really worried, we start letting this all occur, basically that will open up, if we deny any RU2s between Smithfield and Richmond, I think basically we've set a precedence, and you've just opened it up, and I think we would have lawsuits left and right between Smithfield and Richmond all the way through. I mean, every parcel would have its own unique standard then. And I've got 300 acres in between there that let's go RU2 on all those. I don't want to do that, and I won't, but I'm just saying, everything, you know, if you start treating everything the same, I really worry about going to that kind of a standard, having such a rezone. I could not vote in favor of this myself, so. And I know the owner of the property very well, but I have to, you know. Anyway, Nan, we've already had the public hearing. Yeah, I'm sorry. What other questions that we would have here? Okay, we'll talk about it a little bit later then. Okay, with that in mind, let's go back to 6B, discussion of changes to policies on the accessory dwelling units.
Thank you.
Nelson Tim Watkins.
Thank you, and I'd like to excuse Stephen Nilsson, who would be here presenting were it not for his paternity leave. Family has a new member that hello to Stephen if he's watching in this evening. So we've been working pretty hard to try to coordinate and work on refinements or amendments to the accessory apartment use type in our code, which is 1120 accessory apartment, and to consider our moderate income housing plan that was recently updated in February, understanding that we have an August 1st deadline to report to the state on progress towards implementing the moderate income housing plan. I just have this slide as kind of a reminder of that is coming up quickly, and hence the need and the appreciation for setting a hearing on July 25th to consider the proposed amendments to the what would change from accessory apartment to accessory dwelling unit amendments. And that's to be more consistent with the state code updates to require in certain communities above a certain population threshold to require at least internal accessory dwelling units. And so this has been a topic in Planning Commission meetings under review for several months now. And I'd just like to share with you some highlights from this most recent recommended amendment document that we've been touching up since the commission reviewed it just this past Thursday. And what is reflected in here are some considerations that we heard from both engineering and fire. We worked with these other department staffs to understand what some of the concerns might be for accessory dwelling units of 3 different types, and in particular, whether or not to allow detached accessory dwelling units is a key question, and turns out to be a recommendation of the Planning Commission. And so for me, I'll just kind of flip through this document fairly quickly, just touching on some of the key aspects. That the amendments would clarify that only one ADU is allowed in the A10, RU2, or RU5 zone, that these must be owner-occupied either in the primary dwelling or in the ADU, and that's 1C. That recreation vehicles, shipping containers, mobile homes would not be considered for an ADUs. And that neither the ADU or the primary unit could be sold apart from each other, that they by deed need to reflect that there's a limitation on selling them separately. And so of the 3 types of ADUs defined in this draft amendment, the first is internal ADU, and this is what the state requires for communities, both counties and cities, with a population over 5,000. And so this is clarifying that definition that the primary dwelling footprint, which would include a garage if the garage is connected to the primary living area or dwelling by a common wall. And so that's some helpful clarification there. And in the case of a basement or an above garage or a second level internal ADU, the state does not allow for a size limitation of that ADU. And so where we had previous size limitations, those have been removed. In fact, any regulation for indoor function or layout of that is not allowed by state code. Only external appearance can be regulated. The other type of ADU that our code currently allows is called an attached ADU, and this would be an appendage or an extension from the primary dwelling unit footprint. And in this case, Planning Commission and staff have worked together to come up with a slight increase from our current code limitation of 1,000 square feet to 1,200 square feet, or a total area that is less than 50% of the total square footage of the primary residence, with a maximum 1,200 square feet. And that this should have or must have an internal connection between common living areas between the primary unit and the accessory apartment. The third type that you recall having a combined workshop meeting with Planning Commission a few months ago, there was some discussion about potential concerns related to detached ADU impacts and understanding what those concerns are. And we've had the opportunity to meet, as I mentioned, with fire and engineering, interviewing some other counties in an effort to better understand what these impacts might be. And so some of these, the recommended mitigations to these impacts are included in this description of detached ADU. And I will mention that the Planning Commission considered a draft ordinance without the detached ADU option and with the detached ADU option, and their preference unanimously was to recommend to include the detached ADU. And so some of the standards, again, attempting to address some of the concerns we've heard related to density, that detached ADUs effectively increase density of an area, and so the recommendation here is to limit these to the A10 zones and not be an allowed option in the RU5 or the RU2 zone. That they would have the same front, rear, and side yard setbacks as the primary dwelling unit. Limiting the size to 1,200 square feet or 50% of the total square footage of the primary residence. Limiting the height so that it's just under the maximum height of a single-family residence or primary residence. And then to have an increased separation. And this may require some further refinement based on our continued conversation with fire that 10 feet would be too close, perhaps 20 feet is also too close, but some minimum and maximum location from the primary residence. The detached ADU sharing the same driveway, so it's very clear how to access it, the same driveway as the primary dwelling, and complying with the design standards.
Okay.
And let's see, ADU, detached ADU having the addressing information posted on the primary entrance and at the property entrance. So it's very clear to emergency responders and servicers where that is located. And then there was some discussion about fires suggestion for fire suppression sprinkler system for a detached ADU or a pressurized fire hydrant. And this is something that I think will require some additional discussion, as I think it was perhaps unclear to the Planning Commission whether this was a recommendation or a suggested requirement to meet health safety code standards. I will mention that further down in the document in this draft ordinance is 4B, which states that ADUs must be permitted and approved by Bear River Health Department, Division of Water Rights, and County Development Services, Public Works, and Fire Departments with respect to sanitation, water drainage, and land use building safety codes. In other words, this is a catch-all that if there's a state agency or other department that has requirements, then those must be met. So that's an attempt to provide a bit of an overview, and the Planning Commission also recommended some flexibility in terms of how an attached ADU attaches to a single-family dwelling, that it's either maintaining the current code 20-foot minimum attachment, or if there's a shorter wall to connect to that entire wall length, so that it does have the appearance of a single-family dwelling. So that's a little bit of a quick overview, and just wanted to invite any questions, comments, and then we'll get this out to you in very good time to review and be ready for the hearing on the 25th.
I have a couple questions.
Yes.
I find it interesting that the detached is only allowed in the A10, and yet the state code specifically says the A10 can restrict a detached, but we cannot restrict it in an RU5 or an RU2, correct? That was presented in our presentation, that an A10 can restrict a detached. I would like Chief Hammer to address the council and tell the council the fire concerns they have on detached in A10. And so those are 2 points that I'd like to make aware to the council, because that wasn't presented in there, and yet it was presented in our workshop, that an A10 by state code can decline a detached.
Correct. Any of the zones can.
Why doesn't it consider it in an RU5 and an RU2?
The reason why it was suggested for Planning Commission's consideration was based on our understanding of engineering and fire's concern about creating too much density in the county unincorporated area without services, and that by limiting a detached accessory option to the A10 rather than to the RU5 and RU2, it would prevent too much density from concentrating with additional.
Forego density, but we don't consider that A10 is agricultural, and we're kind of forgetting that in this whole scenario, and yet state code said we could not recommend a detached in an A10. And so I find that conflicting in the presentation that we're not talking about that.
I see. I think this was just an attempt to balance the feedback we're hearing from fire engineering along with, and balance that with planning commission's desire to recommend a detached accessory unit. So we're trying to consider all aspects of feedback, and that's where it landed.
Am I okay to ask Chief Hammer present his concerns on a detached in an A10?
I would, actually, if we could wait till, let's have the public hearing, will be in 2 weeks, and we'll get information from Chief Hammer and kind of vet that all together. It's just kind of just a, just a little bit of an intro, discussion. Yeah, I'd like to have seen this before.
Yeah, can we get a copy of that?
I know it'll be sent to us for the next one, but for us to, when you come up and you discuss this, I would like to have seen this stuff before, that we then would have been prepared maybe with a few other questions, so.
Indeed, and this is a fresh recommendation from Thursday, and we just incorporated their modifications today.
So we'll have this stuff sent to us so we can then look at.
We also talked about tiny homes and foundation requirements or whatever on those things. Did you put that in? I didn't see it.
Yes.
And this is supposed to address our housing
Or
crisis.
moderate housing.
One strategy, one of a few strategies. Here it is, under 3G. ADUs must be built on a permanent foundation.
Okay, so that covers the tiny homes type of thing.
Correct.
Trailers and everything. Cool, thank you.
Yep, you bet.
Okay,
Thank you.
we'll have that more discussion and we'll have the public hearing at the next meeting and go from there. So, Micah, he just gave us the nod that he'll forward that on to us, that we'll have that we can study and ready for the next meeting.
Can he pass in the state code stuff so we can reference that as well?
Yeah, I'll find that.
Yeah, that would.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Let's go on to the ARPA funds. Dr. Burgess.
All right. So I've been asked to come before you this evening and talk about the suggestions from the Budget Committee on the process of outside entities applying for ARPA funds. So the Budget Committee met on June 26th, had a lengthy discussion on a variety of things, and I put this in an email. It was sent back out to the Budget Committee, and then it was forwarded, and you should have been able to review this information. I'll just summarize it. The email was sent to you, and I'll summarize that in a minute. There were a few attachments that were discussed during the Budget Committee meeting. Some of the members of that committee wanted to see awarded funding from the Wraps and Restaurant program. So I sent those out in a couple of attachments, as well as the CARES fund that had been distributed previously by the Cache County. And then an application that is very similar to the Wraps application, but it was revised and discussed and reviewed by the Budget Committee, and that was passed on to you as well. So these are all just suggestions. I think was to come to this body, and then you are going to decide what to do in the next steps, I guess. So one of the suggestions was to divide it. There's approximately $1 million, but to divide it into a couple of parcels or a couple of amounts, $750,000. Open that up perhaps to Cache County departments again. They've had a few rounds of that, but open that up again. And then if there was no interest from additional projects from county departments, then open that or take that remaining amount out to the municipalities. It was also suggested that $250,000 could be opened up to nonprofit organizations in the county. And it was suggested that maybe they could provide matching funds, and that would help them or make them more favorable to the review committee. The budget committee, because there was a little over 1.4 million left, they felt like holding back some of that amount in case or providing a buffer in case some projects went over. That's perhaps maybe a concern, and so it was put in here that if you hold that buffer back, you want to make sure that you look at it, review it, along with any other unobligated funds that could be in other projects, because all of the ARPA funds need to be obligated by December 31st of 2024. That means they have to be obligated in a contract or some other approved method of obligation, and then they have to be completely spent and completed by the end of December 31st, 2026. So this was sent out to the Budget Committee. I got a couple of responses back and said this is what we discussed, and they wanted to pass it on to this body and for your discussion from there. So any questions? I think the majority of the Budget Committee is here, so if I miss something, hopefully they'll make corrections. And there was a question about if it's compared to RAPS. If we get 79 applications, and depending on the size of the review committee, the books could be as big, so.
Committee.
Alma, maybe I missed it, but how's the application going? You know, have you worked on, say, if it is open to nonprofits? Yeah.
But yeah, the application, you should have been provided with that application. It is very similar to the RAPS application. A couple of the changes, there's a unique entity identifier that we would need from them. Of course, the Budget Committee really emphasized the need for tax forms, documentation of that. There was a couple of other questions that were added, like how many does your entity serve annually, and how many would be served by this project, just to make sure that it is being used right. And of course, you know, the process would be, if these applications, if you do decide to do that, the applications would come in, they would be reviewed by staff of the finance office or department, and then it would go to perhaps the Budget Committee and then come to you for final approval and review.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, how do you feel?
How much monitoring will have to be done on behalf of the county if we open this up to outside entities?
So just like, well, let me kind of describe the process now. The majority of the money has been allocated in projects to the county. We've developed like a Google sheet, and so they have to put in the receipts and the project, and we review those and make sure that they're abiding by what they said they would do. And I have to report quarterly to the U.S. Treasury. I have another report due the end of this month, and so we would need to get reports from the entities if it were opened up and awarded to outside entities. There would be quarterly reports. We would review any receipts, invoices that come in before any expenditures are sent to them, and so on at least a quarterly basis. And then, you know, we would have to make sure that they're able to obligate those funds.
Sorry, I'm going to ask another question.
No, please.
Do we have any worry about leaving that $500,000 buffer, which we like as a savings, but also this isn't a savings account because it has to be used by a specific date?
Right, and that was what I kind of mentioned, and maybe I'll make it a little more clear. If you do hold that back as a buffer, you've got to be able to provide, and the suggestion was made maybe the first quarter of 2024. You look at that, as well as any other funds that may be unobligated in the county or other projects, and you need to look at them and give other entities, other departments, whatever direction that you go, enough time to be able to, hey, we have a project, and at that point, it's probably gonna have to be really shovel-ready
Yeah.
and say, hey, we can do this, and we can get it obligated by the end of 2024.
Yeah, we talked about basically having a firm deadline by which we either needed to have that money spent or open it up for another round of applications.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
When the money was released by the federal government, was there specific guidelines that, that addressed nonprofits or how the money was supposed to be allocated within the county? And what were those?
Yeah. So if I can just really briefly explain that process. So when it first was released, the money was released, it came in 2 tranches, they called. And they also released at that time an interim final rule, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but an interim final rule. And then it's some FAQs from frequently asked questions and some other guidance with reporting and stuff like that as providing the guidelines. And it was very specific as what could be done with the money. It does mention nonprofits. It does mention businesses. There are a lot of things that are mentioned in that. Then, and I don't remember the dates, then it came out with the final rule, and then the interim rule was no longer valid. And then there was an overview for the final rule that came out, as well as the frequently asked questions. And so we review that, and that's why when you say, is something qualified, it depends. We have to understand it the best that we can, and then look at the overview of the final rule, the frequently asked questions, kind of have a discussion in our office for those or with those that have been acquainted with that, as to make a decision as to whether it is qualifies or not.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chair, again, I have a question. Maybe this is more directed to the budget committee, just where they got the numbers from. Just rounding, was it easier that way? I don't know. I just kind of, when I see that we're gonna reserve almost $500,000 for savings, it can't be used as a savings. I'd hate for it to just be a hasty, we gotta get rid of this money or we're gonna lose it. I don't know. I just was gonna ask to see if maybe we could look at adjusting those numbers, just because then we can give it the time to evaluate some of those projects instead of just maybe, you know, first quarter we know how government works really efficiently, but maybe it would be a little more efficient to include that thought process in the amounts. But is that always set by the budget committee? I'm sorry, I don't know. Or is that something we could set here as a different amounts?
Yeah, the budget committee is just a recommendation.
Yeah.
Ultimately, up to the council.
That's what I was gonna add, is that these are just suggestions. Halma
Exactly.
did great work in summarizing what the budget committee had been talking about, but it's presented here as a recommendation so that we can chew it up and then pass along something that maybe this body is more comfortable with. As far as the dollar amounts, I mean, it was, in comparison to what we just saw with the request from Public Works at last meeting, where they had a project that had already received ARPA funding, and then in order to actually complete that project, they required more funding than had been awarded, and it was significantly more than this 500,000. So that's kind of what was on our mind as a budget committee, was that significant additional cost due to market conditions. 500,000 wasn't even a drop in a bucket to even being able to complete that already previously awarded project. So relative to some of the projects out there, 500,000, it's a huge amount of money regardless, but relative to the projects, it's actually not that big. So that was the thinking, but yeah, anything, it's all up for adjustment.
I didn't want to just have to throw it at whatever at the last minute, because we thought, well, we might as well use it, because this is free money, right?
Yeah.
No.
I don't want to go there.
Wow. That sounds like a Democrat.
Good sarcasm. Good sarcasm.
Not really, is it?
The look on Dave's face was
I was gonna say, well,
awesome. He spun in his chair.
I just gave you the Paul Borup look. Especially free money.
Yeah, these are all just suggestions. You can go a different direction, you can do,
I think the process, what the budget committee's come up with is very palatable.
Yeah.
I really do. And I think that, personally, I'd say let's go ahead and move along with that. And, you know, and hate to say it, but there's some of that will probably need to be expedited because of the time crunch. You know, start moving along and reaching out to everybody and make sure things, I do share the same concerns which you brought up that mentioned that, you know, the reporting process, when you do farm those funds out to so many different entities, and then you're working with so many different entities to try to do all of the reports by collecting all of theirs, that can be very, you may need 4 years to do it, or 3 years to do it,
So you
so.
put in an application for ARPA funds to cover your costs to manage all the ARPA funds.
that's actually a valid,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that would be fairly, it's doable, but it would be enduring and it would be expensive.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind.
That's my position, but we're not using ARPA funds for it, so.
By the way, and I don't know if bridges can fall, we do have the most dangerous bridge in the state of Utah in our county.
Really?
I sure wish we could actually just replace it. It's out in Lewiston. It was deemed as like one of the, I think it's #1 dangerous bridge in the state of Utah that we really need to look at, so.
Yeah, we would have to look at that individually.
But anyway, that's, okay.
Once it falls in the water, then it'll qualify.
Then it's a water project.
I have connections. Any other questions? Appreciate that. What do you feel, everyone feel like that, to go ahead and get that?
Yeah.
That process going with the budget committee and work with that, or what do you think?
Could we have a formal vote from the council approving the proposed plan?
I would like to see the plan before I vote on it, though. I want all the, you know, you mentioned it, that's great, but I want to see, this is the actual write-up. I'm not going to vote on.
Okay.
Do you not have that?
You should have,
We got
Yeah.
it in an email,
you should have,
and
I
it
can't get
said
into my email.
options.
And I was looking for it under the meeting.
It wasn't on the meeting. Okay, yeah, all I saw was the email Alma had
Yeah.
said, saying this option, this option, this option.
Yeah, potential options.
So I
There's
agree.
a lot of detail I think we still need to.
So we could have Alan bring that back then next time.
Would,
Okay.
Spelled out.
Yeah.
With, do we need to specify which options or?
Yeah,
Do you feel like you have enough information, Alma?
so what so you wanted to divide it into some for the nonprofits, some for maybe look at inside the county, other departments, see if they have some others, and then whatever remains from that goes out to municipalities.
right.
And hold back the 400 and something thousand.
Set it up like that, subject
Okay.
to change.
Okay,
Okay, we'll bring that back.
That would be great. I would like to see something just very concrete. An email to me is still not very concrete unless it's, you know, it needs to be on our agenda
okay,
and put it here, so, okay.
okay.
Appreciate that very much. Let's go ahead and let's go down to initial proposals for consideration. Ordinance 2023-22, 8479 rezone. This is initial. First time, you know, on there, so what is your pleasure there? What are your thoughts?
I find no pleasure there, so.
No pleasure there? Want to digest it more, or want to wait? What do you, just you guys tell me.
I'm really torn on the issue because I feel like the things, as a planning commissioner, I don't like spot zoning either. And something that deviates from the plan, the general plan. However, I feel like land on that highway, that needs to be a mitigating factor that we consider as we consider that. And anyway, I do want to keep thinking about it and talking about it, but I really appreciated the insight from Chairman Erickson and Councilman Gunnell. Because my initial thought was, I think it's okay, but then there's obviously a lot more to think about and talk about. I don't know if anybody
I
else.
think you know my feeling. I mean, I understand that, but if we go here, where do we stop? Because there's a lot of unique pieces of property is my concern, so. And addressing them individually down the road can be considered, but everybody has different needs and everything else. And so to not have to get yourself into that unique situation, that's why I sat on the planning and zoning, that's why I wanted the council on planning and zoning to meet and discuss, okay, where do we want RU2s, where do we want RU5s, what are we respecting? And so that's where I come back to. So I'm having hesitancy of accepting this, and I know it's unique, but my daughter had a joke one time, how do you catch a unique rabbit? Unique up on them. So how do you deal with unique properties? They unique up on us, and so we're going to have them. So
I also think too, we need to look at out 20, 30 years. If we do something with this, how is another council going to be able to, you know, solve the problem? We've inherited a few things with, you know, with decisions that were made years ago. And I think we need to take a good hard look at this and see, you know, is that something that's going to cause a problem that some future council's going to have to deal with? And should we take the responsibility now to take care of it and do what we think is best?
I mean, 8991 goes through the county, and I come down to Wellsville, that's where I'm from, and I can identify probably 5 pieces of property right now that are small and little next to the highway because of the highway widening, and it affected property owners, and they have a unique situation. So we got to deal with this the whole way through the county, and then anytime any road is expanded or anything else that goes there, we're going to have that issue. So I appreciate the fact of having a discussion and see where we go there, because I think the Planning Commission did that, but I think this is where we have to make a solid decision and stand by what we've directed and everything else so that we're together on it and understand, just like you're saying, down the road. So that didn't make it any clearer for the chair, did it?
I almost, I think it's great dialogue, Ty.
I'm ready to vote, but I'm also ready to have discussion and go longer, whichever works.
I want more discussion.
You want to digest it and come back and have readdress it at the next meeting? And
Yeah, I want to look at it a little more carefully.
okay, that's the initial proposal, so we'll come back on the agenda for our next meeting, and maybe we'll hear more in between, I'm sure. Let's go to Resolution 2023-08. Dr. Adams.
You should all have the policy in your media packet that I will be discussing, as long as I can get logged in here. No, we're fine.
You're done.
We're just gonna talk. So this is the cell phone policy that has been brought before the Ordinance and Policy Review Committee, and multiple versions have come through there. So we have really vetted this a lot and thought about a lot of different things. Currently, there's not a policy that addresses cell phones and how they are either reimbursed or who can use a county-owned cell phone as far as our employees go. And so this brings this a uniform a policy together for everyone to be able to follow the same types of policies, and individual departments wouldn't have their own policies, and everyone would be receiving the same type of stipend if they were to receive a stipend. And it also describes the types of employees and the use of how those cell phones would be reimbursed with a stipend. So hopefully you've had a chance to read it. I don't think I should take the time to read that. But I'm happy to entertain any questions that you may have.
Share the process of how it came through ordinance policy and for what, it was quite a few months.
It's been a few months, yeah.
That
We
is
actually
pretty-
started this at the end of 2022, and we addressed it in January and February, I believe, and then there were quite a few questions from the Ordinance and Policy Review Committee, so I went back and did a little bit more homework, and then Civil Attorney Jairus Kendall and I worked on it together to fix what people were looking for and what we were trying to address. And then what you have before you has also now been through 2 more Ordinance and Policy Review Committee sessions.
I believe we even got the blessing of the Sheriff's Department. Which that
That is a big deal, yeah.
That was a big department.
This does address cell phones that would be used by emergency type personnel.
And also with the fire.
And also with our IT personnel as well, because should there be some type of natural disaster, we need to have our emergency center up and operating, and IT is very important in that, so.
Do we have any personnel that has a cell phone that's issued from the county? It's for county use only?
At this point, it would be emergency personnel, and that's where we're headed, yes.
Question, so this goes back to my industry. When a company approves and starts paying for a cell phone, if the employee is on that cell phone and gets in an accident, the liability can shift to the company. Have we looked at what that would do here as far as the county and everything else?
We do have that in our policy that states that employees driving an county-owned vehicle should not be using a personal or county-owned cell phone. So, except for emergency personnel at that point. So, this would be that we're paying a stipend for someone to use their personal cell phone for county business. So it's actually saving the county money so that we don't have to provide cell phones to all employees that need a cell phone, but they're providing the phone, they're providing the plan. We're paying them a stipend or a type of a reimbursement, I guess.
And that's exactly what happened on this company during COVID is, okay, you're working from home, so if we're helping you on your cell phone use and you get in an accident, then the liability can shift. And so I just want to make sure that we're watching that as a county so that liability, and if that policy's there, then that should.
The policy is there, and our civil attorney did help work on the policy, and he didn't bring any of that to light or have that concern, but if that's something that you'd like me to look more into, I certainly can and come back next time.
So this is a question because I don't know. Have we never paid employees before for any cell phone use or anything? We've never compensated them before?
We have. The reason that this is coming about is because people are getting paid different amounts depending on which department you are, and so we're just trying to make this so that it's all the same.
So is that based on this uniform? Will that increase our costs or?
No, it should keep them about the same.
About the same. Okay.
I have a question. It talks about the stipend amounts, and you have to ascertain what percentage of use the cell phone is being used for county business. Is there really a way to do that? Like, have you talked about that?
That would be determined by the department head, and I believe that it talks about that in the policy. And so the department head would be the one that would be, this would be part of their budget that they're asking for, and so they would know out of the positions that need a cell phone, the types of use what they would be using it for, and they would be able to budget for that and then be able to give that stipend to that employee for that types of uses.
Does that
usage.
break down between voice and data, like if they're using the internet or anything else that way, or how? they do it?
No, we didn't go that granular.
But that's something a department head could consider.
It's granular, but it's causes different expenses from what goes on there, so.
Right, but the department head, this isn't meant to cover all of their cell phone expenses because they are using their phone for personal use as well. This is just to be, we'll pay you if you would like to use your phone for county business, or we need you to use your phone for county business.
Yeah.
You guys have tough questions tonight.
Where did you come up with the amount, the money?
The amounts. So I pulled up the top three or five, I can't remember, cell phone plans that were available and looked at how much that average cost was. And the $85 was the average cost. And then from there, I broke it down according to the percentage use.
Great questions. Any others? How do you, go ahead, Carl.
I was just going to say, I think this is needed, and I appreciate the research that you've done and the thought process going into this to make it so that we have a standard across the county
Thank you.
for this
Yeah.
important means of communication. I mean,
I will point out that it does say in the policy that the compensation committee will review those amounts annually, and so that will be part of our compensation discussion, and then that would be brought before the council if any of those needed to be adjusted in the future.
Okay, my last question, maybe.
That's a lie.
Maybe.
Okay.
Make it an easy one.
I don't know whether to respond to your question or ask. If I respond to yours, I'll have to censor my comments on tape. So anyhow, elected officials, it talks about in there. So when, and I tread on this carefully because I know when I'm running, or did run, my cell phone was blown up with calls and everything else. And so if you've got an elected official, which it talked about in here, how are you, I mean, that's an elected official choosing to run who's going to be compensated. So is that really county business if an elected official has a cell phone and is under this plan? Does that make sense?
Kind of.
Kind of, because if during my campaigning period, my cell phone is blitzed out with calls of people calling in. If I have an elected official on here, it says it is in this policy, then that,
I'm sorry, I can't get it to pull up on my computer. Can you read, does it say full-time elected officials, or does it just say elected officials?
that's a good question. It just said department head or elected official, so elected official, they're considered a county employee, right?
So it says this level is reserved for full-time employees who are department heads, elected officials, public safety, or exempt employees. So the way that I'm reading it and the way that I understood to write it was that you would need to be a full-time employee who is a department head and elected official, so as a full-time.
So we have a number of elected officials who are working now and who run for an office.
Right.
During their campaigning period, their phone is going to be blown up with people calling or whatever else.
With personal
Are you
calls.
saying before they,
Or county people calling them about what their elected position or their stand is. So
are you saying before they win the election?
during their campaigning part, yes. So
So at that point, they wouldn't be considered an employee.
If they were an
That
incumbent.
would be
Well,
all
talk about
personal.
an
They-
incumbent.
Every one of those
Or
would
an
be a personal
incumbent,
call.
thank you.
Even
Talking about
your
incumbents.
stance on things during the campaign, that's all personal calls. That would not
what
count.
if I'm running for reelection?
It's still personal calls. If it has a bearing, I think personally, if it has a bearing on your election and you're working with that, if you get a call about things that's about the election, that's all personal business and should not count toward the time that you're going to be using or to get the stipend. I think that's just separate. Plus, these are pretty well set and standard for the year. So these little election years, not election years and everything, I don't think they're gonna have much of a bearing on what the stipend does. It's pretty well set in stone for several years, or a year, then a year and a year. They're not gonna say, oh, it's election year, let's raise it. No. You wanna be paid for all your campaign calls?
I don't want to be paid for any campaign.
Yeah, there you go.
Don't know if I want
See?
a campaign.
You'll get it. That's good, though. Good, great questions. Others? This is initial, but
Well, I would waive the rules and make a motion to approve Resolution 2023-08, amending the Cache County Personnel Policy and Procedures Manual regarding county cell phones and cell phone stipends.
I'll second.
moved and seconded that we waive the rules, Resolution 2023-08 on the cell phone stipend within the policy procedure manual. All those, is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Unanimous.
Thank you.
Ordinance 2023-24, amending and updating the requirements to serve on the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay, I'll talk about this one. So our planning commission here in Cache County makes decisions solely for the unincorporated areas of the county. And with that in mind, this ordinance would update the requirements for who can serve on the planning commission. It would require that a majority of the planning commission, that's no fewer than 4 members, either maintain a permanent residency or own real property in the unincorporated areas of the county. So the justification being that because that planning commission makes decisions for the unincorporated areas, it should be heavily represented by people from the unincorporated areas. So I live in Logan. It would be strange if I was appointed to serve in the Nibley City Planning Commission. And this is kind of in that same spirit. So that's all this does. And then I would also add, sorry, that it would require the executive to verify that residency requirement and to communicate that when the name is presented. And then finally, our current planning commission does meet this requirement. And so we wouldn't need to worry about some kind of transition process because we're already in compliance with it.
Very sensible.
Pardon?
Very sensible.
Yeah.
I thought so. I've been
I would
pushing for
even-
this for a long time.
I would like to up it from 4 to 5 or 6.
How many people sit on the commission?
7.
7?
How many of us live in unincorporated? Just you two?
Not enough.
Just like see the representation that we have for that.
Yeah.
Some citizens have come to me, it's like, you know, I own ground in the unincorporated area and my voice is heard, but I'd really like some people who understand what my voice is about. So that's why I think this helps in that area. I still go back to the Board of Adjustments. I understand what we did, but I served on that for a while and there was community involvement. So it's getting tough to get the community to be involved, but personally I like this, so helps with that area.
Changed it to 5 instead of 4.
Would that,
Would that still be, would the current commission
Oh, yeah.
still be in compliance?
matter of fact, 6, I believe, out
I
of,
believe right now the number is 6.
yeah, 6 out of 7 currently.
Yeah.
I think I'd be comfortable with 5.
Yeah,
I
think
would too.
5 would be good.
It's not quite, is that a super majority?
That'd be a super majority.
Just maybe if I could add this, that will make it more difficult to find people. We're basically cutting down your available recruitment pool from 150,000 people to 5,000 people. So, and I'm not speaking against this, just throwing some thoughts out. Because my practice so far has been to work with council members in finding people. And so I might need more of your help in finding people if we narrow it down that much more.
Happy to do so.
Yep.
And both of you have helped me with the last 2, so I appreciate that. And just maybe if I could share my approach has been that I want the most qualified person. And I actually haven't really looked at where they resided or owned property. I think this discussion started a couple of years ago. We had a vacancy, and the chair at the time, Gina Worthen, mentioned to me that there wasn't somebody from her district who served on the planning commission, and she wanted somebody from her district on the planning commission. So in that vacancy, I worked with her to identify someone from her district, which her district doesn't really include very many, only a few residents in that district, in that unincorporated area. So we searched for somebody and found somebody who actually had experience with this type of thing, who I think was a very qualified appointee. So just a couple of thoughts out there. And ultimately, the Planning Commission is, in many respects, an advisory body, and ultimately the council makes final decisions, especially on policy, but also on some types of approvals, like rezones, for example. And I think it's also important for us to remember that we all represent the entire county. We don't just represent the unincorporated area. Most of our constituents are people who live in cities, and it is important for us to recognize that the decisions we make don't just affect the unincorporated area, but also affect the people in the cities, especially when they influence things like traffic, for example. So those are just a couple of thoughts I had, but I don't necessarily have a position for or against this, but those are my thoughts.
I appreciate those thoughts. I agree, we represent everybody, but,
Well, and can I just interject here? One important aspect to remember about the Planning Commission is that they are a quasi-judicial body. The only thing that they can act on is approval of existing laws that are in place. They don't set laws, they don't set policy. They rule on whether or not this application coming forward is in compliance with the existing laws and statutes of the county. And so they really can't determine what policies are, is all they can do is rule on whether this particular project meets county code and county statutes.
But they only deal with unincorporated properties.
Right.
And that's it.
well, and with the state legislature passing requirements on subdivisions, the planning commission has less time to vet a subdivision now in unincorporated county, and so does the development office, and that's just gonna be thrown at them like crazy. Micah, you studied other counties that have this type of process in the state, and there are others, correct?
Yes, there's a couple other counties that limit who can serve on planning commissions. They do it in different ways. The closest would probably be Summit County, which actually has 2 planning commissions, and one for kind of the Park City side of the county, and another planning commission for the other side of the county. Those are 2 very different areas. And the requirement, all the requirement is that you have to live in either one of those 2 zones to be in that zone's planning commission. And so this would, we're not creating 2 planning commissions, obviously, but we are requiring that you live in the place where that
Live or own, or
Live
have
or
a
own.
vested interest in that properties.
And I think that's the other thing. I think hopefully we can increase, we're decreasing the pool, but I don't know if we're decreasing it all the way down to 5,000, because in fact, there's members of the planning commission today that live in municipalities, but who own land in our farming or elsewhere, that own land, own property in the unincorporated areas. So we are limiting it, but we're not limiting it all the way down to only the residents of unincorporated. So there's a little bit more space here.
I also think, to what Carl said, the Planning Commission is tasked with just making determinations, does this meet the code or not? They don't write the law. However, we do, like in this current situation where we're considering their recommendations for the ADUs, we kind of rely on them to vet that and have those major discussions and bring their consensus to us. And those ADU stipulations would only be applicable to the unincorporated areas. And so there is that they're more invested in being able to, make those recommendations to us so that we can set that law that they have to follow in that code.
But they do help formulate
Yeah, they do.
those zone, those laws, just ADU. That came through planning and zoning. With their approval and so forth, as they're looking at, same kind of so they do have an impact, but yet the final decision still is with Cache County
I'm
Council.
going to add an E to ADU, so it's a 4-letter word, so.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, I mean, my comment came, I sat for 13 years on the Logan City Planning Commission and went through lots of training. And it was hammered into us over and over and over again. You do not set policy, is all you do is act as a judge to determine whether or not this project is in line with the codes and the policies of Logan City. And they just hammered over and over again. You cannot change those laws and you cannot change those codes. And so remember where you sit. And I think we went through, I probably had 3 training things down at the state capitol that just hammered that into my head. This is what you are, and this is what you not are. This is what you are not. That's a better way to say it. So anyway, that's where my comment came from.
So under the county code, the planning commission can only approve 3 different things. There's subdivisions, subdivision amendments, and conditional use permits. So those are the 3 that they have land use authority over. And then the council ultimately approves all land use ordinances or amendments to land use ordinances. And then the council approves rezones. Those are considered legislative actions, as well as annexations. And then general plan amendments. So those are things that the council has reserved for itself. And then there are some that the land use hearing officer will now hear, which it was Board of Adjustments before. So variances and appeals go to them. So the planning commission doesn't even hear variances or appeals. And then there are some as well that the planning director even has authority to approve, like zoning clearances, for example. So the way that the council has set it up is that land use authority has been delegated to 4 different individuals or bodies already.
Okay, go ahead.
Was your recommendation to increase the amount to 5?
Mine was.
I would
So-
still support that.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that too.
Super majority, but gives a little more teeth in it, but.
Need to take a vote on the amendment.
I meant to change it to 5 individuals that live in the unincorporated area of Cache County.
Second?
Second.
Move second that we amend this ordinance from 4 to 5 within the unincorporated area ownership / live residence. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all those in favor of that amendment, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Now I'll entertain any motion for the ordinance itself. It is the initial with that change, so, or you want to wait, that's up to you.
I will make a motion. I will waive the rules and make a motion that we approve ordinance amending 17.02, updating requirements to serve on the Planning and Zoning Commission, as so mentioned.
Second.
Moving seconded that we,
Do we need to vote on waiving the rules every time, or is that part of the vote?
that's part of the motion. Yep, thank you. Hey, good to have you, by the way. We ought to welcome you.
Oh.
Thanks, Mr. Benson, appreciate it. Glad you'll let yourself know. That's cool. Give us a wave once in a while. Anyway, moving seconded that we waive the rules and pass ordinance 2023-24, 1702, updating the requirements to serve on the Planning and Zoning Commission as amended. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Hyde Park, we look on there. Hyde Park hometown, you've got it on there, Mark.
We're gonna drive and throw candy, wave, do all the
Yeah,
waving.
yeah.
Like, you coming? Okay,
Yeah, Mike was gonna drive.
okay, so
I'll drive.
you'll bring the pickup too, or vehicle?
July 15th, that Saturday.
I can provide my own, or provide it, whatever you want. Okay, we'll be in touch.
Any other additions, deletions to North Logan, Logan Pioneer Day, USAC?
Yeah, Mayor Alder is visiting us, and she said that Providence City Sauerkraut Days is the 14th, August 14th through the 18th, 19th, and they have a parade on the 17th. And has invited us to participate.
Okay, I'll get us set up for that. Are you going to that then?
Yeah, I'll be in that.
When I was a kid, I hated sauerkraut.
Oh,
But you know,
sauerkraut's so
nowadays,
good.
I love sauerkraut. I mean, I went to Holland there on a mission, and I grown to love sauerkraut. So,
The 4-day festival.
anyway, okay, so that'll be on August 14th. We can add those. We have Catherine on that. Any others gonna?
I'll be out of town.
Don't know yet, maybe.
Okay, well, we'll put that one on there so that we can add to it later.
Question mark on me, Mark.
For Hyde Park?
Yeah.
For Hyde Park? Okay.
Okay.
Sweet.
Council member reports. Carl?
Can I just say, I'm sorry, just one thing. On that USAC conference, did you get me for the 6th also? Okay, awesome. And where's that?
Well, and what time does it start on the 7th, which maybe all of us would have to go down on the 6th?
So they haven't released the agenda.
Yeah.
So I don't have an itinerary for that meeting.
I'm not real anxious to drive all the way down there. I will leave at 3 in the morning, that's fine, but,
I'll give Lauren.
okay. Just touch base on that, and if it is that early, then go ahead and schedule that.
I'm trying to get
launching.
my schedule to work, so I hopefully can attend it, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'll let you know this week if I can.
In our last USAC Zoom conference on that, they're getting some really, really good topics put together for that. I think that would be very helpful. A lot of sales taxes and information that'll be shared, tax commission stuff and everything. So it might be, I think it'd be quite informative. So, councilman reports, Carl.
I didn't have a report necessarily, but I just wanted to mention what we had this presentation about the use of these ARPA funds. And also received an email from Bruce Godfrey concerning cell phone towers on Mount Pisgah and updating and upgrading those cell phone towers. And I just wanted to bring up whether or not that would be an approved use of ARPA funds to bring that to pass too.
Are you referring to the TV translators?
Yes.
Yep.
We can check and see if that's an eligible use.
That is a lot of outdated and old
Yep.
technology and everything, and if it was updated, from what I understand from Bruce, he talked to me about that too when I ran into him. But because it is such outdated, if it was updated, they'd be able to actually broadcast a lot of the local stuff
Channels.
free
Yeah.
versus, which they can't, some of them can't now because of the outdated system. So it's something worth looking into.
So that would be just my request, is that we look into that and see if that's an ARPA qualified expenditure.
We do have, I believe, every year in the budget, there's a little bit that goes to that, but it's pretty minimal.
Yeah.
To maintain it.
Yeah, we've kind of changed our approach on that. Historically, Janine was in charge of that, and there wasn't really any maintenance happening. Janine didn't have the expertise to go up and maintain it. But I've asked our IT department to take that on, and they've already made some improvements, and they're learning as much as they can about the system.
There was a gentleman that was doing it.
Yeah, they do work with an outside contractor as well, they're a little worried that he may be retiring soon, and so they're trying to learn as much as they can from him and upgrade as much of the equipment as they can within the existing budget. But I think they would probably be very open to doing some upgrades if those funds are eligible, so we'll check.
If you'll look into that, I think
Good idea, thank
that
you.
would be a benefit to our county.
Good.
Thank you.
I even got phone calls when people couldn't get their stuff, you know, or televised or anything from out, wanting to know what I could do about it. Not much, but yeah.
Well, we'll see if we can do, well, we're getting cell phone service in the canyon, so maybe we can get
I like that idea.
television broadcasting to the county as well.
I've got nothing. I was gone.
Nothing significant to report?
Okay. Barbara?
Nothing, thank you.
Nolan?
I don't think so.
Nothing new.
Okay. I have one that I would like to publicly mention. I think that I have heard this. It has been quoted by us as to say that there was very few or no audits that occurred by not the last clerk auditor, but the one before that. And apparently I have been corrected that there has been several that were done. And so we shouldn't sweep them under the rug saying nothing happened, because they did. There were things that did occur at that time. So just to correct that one. Other than that, then the dead animal disposal thing, we really need to dig into that.
Literally?
Literally. Yeah. Well, because literally, right now, these big operations have no place to take that on emergency days and stuff. And they're in Amalga that he just shut his gates and he can't afford just to go deliver them without being compensated in any way. And when Logan stripped that subsidy that they were giving him to do that.
How did he dispose of them?
Yeah, he has a rendering facility that he picks and chooses, some of the good ones, but some of those come in there that could almost fly. You know, they're so loaded. And those that he cannot utilize, he would haul those up within a truck and then take them to the landfills themselves.
Okay.
So, anyway, so we need to really address that so that we don't start seeing those, you know, throughout the county. And I think it wouldn't be just within the county. I think it might be everywhere if we don't. You know, you might be smelling them going between Smithfield and Logan if you're not careful. So I guess they can bury them, but that can also cause groundwater, some other issues too. So we probably ought to address that. Other than that, any other? Micah?
A little sign-up form for the Board of Equalization.
Board equalization. This is exactly for the new, those that are new one. If you have never been through some of this, try to sign up with someone that has.
Do we have a training or something that we could?
We will have some,
It's pretty easy to pick up.
but it's pretty easy to,
I went to one and just watched, and I think,
Just the appeals that they.
yeah, it's
bring in?
appeals. And I have not signed up on these. Usually I kind of look at it and everyone else signs and I'll kind of fill in between.
I'll look at my work schedule now that I know the date range.
I believe this was sent to us,
Yeah, I forwarded Diana this.
yeah, it was in your email, I believe it was sent to us there.
So me and Diana are gonna make a Google Sheets,
Okay.
a Google form. So we'll share it with you and you'll be able to fill in the rest. You will need to take 6 to 7 spots.
Michael, will you let her know about the September 7th that we'll be down at the USAC?
That's you said.
Yeah,
So,
That one will have to be
thank you.
completely taken, so. Okay. I'll kind of fill in where we're needed, so.
can I
Other
just
than-
say that I don't feel like I've really arrived yet, because I never get calls from anybody. You guys all talk about the people that call you. Somebody call me and ask me to call.
Whoa, don't,
Oh, boy.
whoa, whoa, whoa.
Okay.
Could you please say your phone number in public here? That is
Call
not,
Sandy.
Sandy's in charge.
Website, right?
Well, I don't know. I guess most, everybody I represent is also in Logan City, so they're probably calling them and not calling me.
I get those emails all the time.
Maybe one day someone will have a question for me.
I've got two I'm going to start forwarding to you.
There, other than that,